what we're going to discuss for the next 40 minutes or so is mental health and faith and faith communities and areas around that. We've got a brilliant panel of guests, so can I welcome in? We've got Mother Carol Barrett Ford from Gospel Oak, St Martin's. Sorry, St Martin's Church, Gospel Oak, isn't it? Apologies, Carol. We've got Rabbi David Mason. Are you there, David? Good show.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Hello, and Bibi Khan from Whiteman Road Mosque. How are you doing today, Bibi?
Fine, thank you. Excuse me, my eyes have got a patch on, but...
Oh, apart from that, are you well?
I'm well, thank you so much, yes.
Good show. Well, yes, I mean, I suppose the reason I wanted to discuss mental health with you guys was because, well, partly because during the last year, obviously, community has been so important during the pandemic, and those working in faith communities have kind of been on the front line with people and the issues they're facing. Bibi, perhaps you'd like to start and introduce the community where you are, and perhaps a bit about the challenges and the response over the last year.
So hi, everyone. Hi, David, Carol, pleased to meet you. So my name is Bibi Khan. I'm from the mosque in Whiteman Road. It's the London Islamic Cultural Society. It's been a really difficult and tiring year. I say tiring because apart from the pandemic, the regulations and the rules we have to follow impacts our community so much because, you know, there's sanitizing, there's wearing of masks. People don't want to wear masks. They can't breathe. It's something alien to majority of us, to be quite honest. So apart from having to cope with whatever has happened during the last year, it's about helping everyone to cope and to follow us as well. Now, when the pandemic first started and none of us knew what this was about, it's kind of like an alien being has dropped onto our world, and suddenly we're faced with something that perhaps the countries have all faced before, with things like polio, diphtheria, smallpox, all of those things. We've never experienced anything like this. And at the beginning, it was really hard because we didn't know how this was transmitted. We even became afraid of people. We became afraid of being around our usual people. People began isolating even if they didn't have to. Because what was happening in our communities was a lot of the older people were actually getting ill, and it resulted in death. And at that time, we were not even allowed to see anyone. You know, if someone passed away at home, they were left there, put into a black bag, which was really traumatic for people to cope with, taken away, not seen again until the day of the funeral. Those who passed away in hospitals or stayed in hospitals for a little while, no one could again see them. You were really blessed if you were a family who had access to any IT equipment to be able to speak to your loved ones in the hospital. You know, but imagine being away from your loved one, only seeing them on the phone, and you can't hold their hands, you can't comfort them at all. Our vice president of our mosque, his wife, she was a dialysis patient. And as a result of going to the hospitals, she picked up COVID. She was in hospital for 3 weeks where they couldn't see her at all. And the end result of that was that she passed away in the hospital. We were not even at that time able to do the customary and religious methods of burial. So you couldn't even do the ablution or the washing that's normally prescribed for us. You were just placed into a bag, put into the coffin, and then taken to the ground and buried. And again, remember, at the burial grounds, there were limited people. So all your families were not even there, you know. Those are the sorts of things that happened during that time. And when it first started, Ramadan was in play at that time, but we could only do it on Zoom or on social medias. And again, it was trying to comfort people without seeing them, without going to share it with them. It's been really traumatic, Andre, if I'm honest. And I don't believe that people have dealt with this. It's only beginning to come out now as we begin to relax and see people. And then you actually share that first-hand information with them or what they've actually gone through. I know things are different now because people can do the washing, and people just didn't understand. It's not blaming anyone at all. People didn't understand what this thing was that we were facing. So now we're actually gearing up and trying to create all the links for what you would say people's mental ill health. What does mental ill health mean? What does that mean? It's the terminology. What exactly does it mean? Because in our religions, in many, many cases, working hand in hand with this pandemic, you come across things like possession, black magic, jealousy. Has someone done something to my family because they're acting differently? People don't always label it as mental health issues. They may actually put in other things that they're thinking from a religious perspective. Do I need someone to do prayers for this, for my child or this person, because they're acting totally different? I think it's fair to say that majority of people I've come across, mental ill health is probably the last thing that they would want their child or husband or wife to be diagnosed with. There's more of a stigma attached to mental ill health than there is to, oh, hold on a second, somebody's just done black magic on my person because they were jealous, you know, and all I've got to do is get the religious leader to do some prayers on them and to wear some religious beads.
Well, there's so much to talk about, isn't there? Perhaps we'll come back to the stigma of mental health a bit later. Perhaps Mother Carol, have you found a similar thing as we're now kind of coming out of the other end of the absolute lockdown, that do you find the congregations coming to terms with the trauma of what happened last year?
So much of what Bibi says, certainly in the first section, really resonates with me. I suppose we talk about the incarnation a lot in the Christian faith. We talk about God among us, God with us, enfleshed, and that's, I suppose, why it was so hard for us not to be able to gather together, because in the gathering together, also our fears are allayed, aren't they? We can bring our fears to each other, to our religious leaders. There's a forum that is set up around our religious services. Of course, people come for their religious services, but they also come for the chat, don't they? They also come because they can share and feel affirmed and feel that their fears might be allayed. And in the closing of our religious places of worship, I think, you know, that caused a real problem for some people, and also then played into the mental ill health that Bibi was speaking about. And while we might not have exactly the same type of things said in a Christian context, what is undoubted is that people feel something needs to be cleansed. So I've had quite a few people ask if I can come and bless the house, which is a very normal, ordinary thing that we would do. And it's almost like a cleansing, if you like, and asking for prayer. So just being out and about over the last few days, I've had a number of people stop me who are not members of my congregation, who don't come to the church, but who spot the collar and say, excuse me, are you can you? And then a huge story comes out, which always centers around loss, not just loss of people, which is of course dreadful, but also loss of liberty, loss of freedom, loss of purpose, loss of meaning, all of these things coming together in a way that that does affect people's mental health. And while they may not be in crisis, there's a kind of a low level mental ill health, and a sense of having lost an entire year. of people's lives. And I think that resonates deeply with what Bibi has said.
Absolutely. And well, David, I think we've spoken before, on the point of the actual closing of the buildings and the lack of the actual event, the gathering. It's such an important thing for all religions, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, by the way, for having me here. It's really good to be part of this with Bibi, my good friend, of course, from our mosque down the road. From what and lovely to meet you, Carol, Mother Carol, as well. I think the word that comes to mind is the word shattering, actually. Our religious life, there was a shatter. I'm not the rabbi of a community that is very observant. There are communities that are much more observant than mine in terms of preciseness of keeping all laws. But nevertheless, there was a sense of shattering, of something was broken by and I think I felt that as a leader. On the one hand, there was a need to lead a community in a way that, hold on a second, because I've got my children here. This is just one of those moments.
This is very 2020, 2021.
Upstairs now with both of you, all of you. now. There you are. You heard some parenting online.
Who's leading?
Unbelievable.
Whether it's the Today program or if it's a Zoom call with your local newspaper, it happens.
Was when you have to parent the children that are in play dates with your daughters. So the word shattering, I think, look, there was a need for immediate leadership. So we had to lead as faith leaders in a way that would keep our communities safe. And we have a value in Judaism, which we call in Hebrew, pikuach nefesh, which means the importance of the soul. The idea that you put the body, the living is first. You can't pray. We believe that there's a value of communal prayer. There's a value of actually being present in the place of worship. And that was shattered. And we had to accept that. And we had to lead on that and say, that's it. We are shuttered. I mean, the government led for us in a way. But even in the third lockdown from January, there was the government allowed places of worship to remain open. And many of us had to say, look, part of me would have rather the government had just said to all of us, shut. Because it was actually harder, because we then had to go, okay, what do? We can be open, but clearly the numbers are rocketing. We need to look after our people. But in that leadership, I remember feeling the trauma myself. There was a sense in which, every day, every week, I'm going up to that place. I sit in my seat. I give the sermon. I lead the prayers. And that's taken. It's gone for months of the last year. That fabric has been shattered. And I suppose we're now going to be in a situation, we all thought this would be a month or two, right? Didn't we? 2-3 months, we're back. Here we are. And we're not even clear about June the 21st and what will be after. So we are now, it's building back now, how people will come back. In some synagogues and mosques and churches, people might come back slowly. They might take their time. There'll be a trauma. So there's definitely a realization that, like, okay, now, if I build back, okay, we'll be allowed to sing at some point louder. But if I do have that singing, will there be people who will be still nervous to come to the place because they don't want the singing, because maybe their neighbor will infect them with COVID still? There'll be still those worries. And to keep the equality and inclusion of your place of worship, you have to think that. And finally, I don't think we should discount the movement to meaning that's happened in our place of worship. I know from my experience, so I'm involved in chairing the Ham&High Faith Network, and I've worked with Bibi a lot on that. And I can be honest and say that, Bibi as a place of worship has suffered a lot more than my community. I'm smaller, it's a younger community. And so less people have died. People have lost parents and had to go through that very, very difficult situation of mourning. Very few people at funerals, etc. But I think people have wanted meaning. They've needed the community so that it can nourish them with meaning in whatever level of religiosity. That prayer, those words, and I mean, obviously, I'll let others speak and I want to come back to it, and we can come back to the online, because, for instance, I still now every week send out a video message to the community, and many people I bump into in the streets throughout the year saying, Rabbi, really, that was so important for us, to give us a positive sense every week.
I'm just going to interrupt the flow slightly because I'm enjoying the storm in the background in your garden, because it's outside my house as well. The wind's really picking up. Everything seems still where BB is.
I should do the weather forecast here as well as parenting, you know.
But the other side of the community and the people needing and wanting that community is people also seem to want to give into communities as well. So obviously in your communities, but also in the appearance of mutual aid groups, suddenly there was a newfound willingness and proactivity to do things where it was allowed and where it's possible and helpful. Mother Carol, perhaps how did that work in your particular community in terms of pulling together?
Oh, well, this is where I start praising Foyser Mia from the Queen's Crescent Community Association from the Heights. And that was one of the great joys for us, is that as we have an older congregation here at the moment, they didn't have the capacity really to start going out and necessarily doing lots of volunteering, with lots of people also who were self-isolating and that kind of thing. But I worked very closely with Foyser, so I looked at who we could partner with, and Foyser was doing some amazing work with during the Ramadan that we had, and doing an iftar meal every evening, and we partnered with him, and we did funded some of those evenings, and then did this big Christmas hamper delivery together. And for me, that was just extraordinary, because it was something that the church could get involved in from the kind of fundraising point of view. And then people who had the capacity to be out there doing deliveries and packing could do that as well. So it was about working out of our strengths, isn't it? You know, what can we do, and not beating ourselves over the head with the things that we couldn't do. So, you know, we couldn't set up a food bank because we didn't have the capacity to run one, but we could partner with somebody else who did. So I think, just from a leadership point of view, thinking, where can I put my energy? Where is it going to pay the best dividends? And who can you work with in your community? And it's cemented a great relationship between myself and Foyser as partners who now work together in things like pop-up vaccine centres and getting the news out there that, you know, we should be vaccinated. And it's, I suppose, out of all things, something good happens. No matter how dreadful something is, you're going to have something good happen out of it. And that sense of developing our partnership and our way of dealing with you know, with the various issues that have come up in the community, I think has been a real godsend for us as well.
And BB, I know that it's similar for you guys, and I think that extra meaning of doing things, of being part of that, has to help with the low level mental health problems that was talked about before. BB, is that? Yeah.
Yes. I think the one good thing, I mean, I think there's several good things, but the one good thing that I'm going to focus on that came out of this pandemic is the ability, the need, the wanting for communities to work together. And I found that really, really enlightening, inspiring, and engaging. So for instance, you know, we always say this word cohesion and community cohesion. We always say it, and it sounds really out of date now because we used that so long ago. However, that's exactly what happened. And food banks, vaccine centres, the hampers, families and community were all being referred to us for help. Schools were experiencing problems with keeping their children, the families, fed. So they reached out to us for some help with food being given to those families. I reached out to the Multi-Faith Forum, and our Multi-Faith Forum in Haringey were wonderful in coming forward to actually supply one of the schools in Haringey and a learning centre as well. We supplied the food bank opposite our mosque, actually found an issue where there were more Muslim families reaching out to food banks. That was never the case before. And they found themselves in a position where they didn't have any halal food, if you like, in tins, etc., that could be given to them. So that was one thing that we could fill the gap with as well. But it's not just for Muslims, it's for all the diversities in our community that we helped. We delivered things to homes. That's where the younger generation came in, because they were eager and wanting to do something. So we channeled that into doing something good. They delivered food to people's houses who were sheltering. They delivered to families. Some families had parents who passed away, you know, and like, for instance, there's one particular family, 4 children, mother passed away, father doesn't really know what to do, how to do things like the mother used to. Those are gaps that we were able to fill, etc. So I think it's a multitude of things, but the really inspiring thing is that we as a community in Haringey have stuck together, and through our multi-faith forum and the meetings we've had, we've been able to support each other in that way, and even deal with experiences, sharing experiences, or getting each other to join together for them as well.
And those sharing experiences and emotional support is so important. David, how that must come up a lot for all of you. How do you then broach the gap if it becomes apparent that actually medical help's needed in specific cases? How do you make those decisions or make that jump, David?
Okay, yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, when you're saying medical help, if I could just clarify, you mean
mental health? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's a very difficult question for faith leaders, because we are pastorally there for our community. I think what I did early on in the pandemic was, you know, create systems that I could be in contact with communities, put up a care line, have a group of volunteers, have a system that was anonymous where people's needs could be met, and that you could then pick up. I set up actually a group of members who are psychologists and therapists, so that if there are individuals that needed a bit more support, we could then intervene and signpost. So I think the most important thing is having the knowledge, and it's simple as that, to know when to signpost people. I think there's a lot of how trauma comes out delayed, doesn't it? There's a sense that it's lagged. So a lot of the trauma of the pandemic will be yet to come out. I feel it myself. I remember feeling almost a high at the beginning, because as a leader, I had to be there for a community, and oh my word, this Zoom works, and wow, I could bring my members together. And there was a 92-year-old lady who came on because I had a volunteers group that worked 3 hours with her to get her on Zoom. She was so happy, you know. And actually now I almost have this feeling, I was like, well, where do we go? So, and how do you broach it with people? How do you now go to your community and ask how are they, and deal with that? Because people are going to find it difficult to actually talk about it. They don't want to admit that they are suffering, because many people are getting on with their life. So I think, yes, as faith leaders, we need to have contact. And I think I probably built that over the number of years. Therefore, it was helpful to have had that contact and that relationship with the community when the pandemic began. But now it's tricky, actually, because you don't want to put it under the carpet, right? You don't want to put it away and think, oh, we can get on and move on now. But at the same time, it's how do you talk about it and structure the conversations with people.
I think that's a large part of the challenge, isn't it? I certainly empathise with the kind of excitement of the start. As a journalist, obviously this was the biggest story, but also not just as a journalist. There is a slight excitement to be living at the time of great events, horrific as well, absolutely. But we can't deny that you get something out of it. And then there was for me personally, there was a period of, oh, actually, this is quite comfortable. There's fewer stresses in kind of bits of life. Life's a bit simpler because I'm in these 4 walls.
And if I just very, very briefly come in, there's something very big about being needed. If you're needed, so if you're part of, so being part of a community and be active, volunteering, helping, delivering, supporting a food bank, being a leader of a community like we are 3 here, you feel there was definitely a sense of feeling needed. I mean, thank God I had a job. You know, people need a rabbi, right? Like, they couldn't get rid of them, but they needed a rabbi. So thank God, you're in a job. There will be many people out there who didn't feel needed. And actually think about, for instance, the nurses, the doctors, the consultants. You know, I mean, I don't want to get political, but when nurses will feel that they're not paid or they're not remunerated in a way that respects what they're doing, you know, then there'll be a lot of people out there for, was I needed? What was my part? And that's hard.
Mother Carol, what came up just before was this kind of stage we're at now, and obviously the stage we're at now where in some ways life is returning to some kind of normality. And so there's a sense in which it almost feels, oh, well, everything should be fine then. And I think there's a kind of unease because everything doesn't feel fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I think I'd just like to pick up on Rabbi David's point. We have a joke about the thing called the hero priest, the priest who only wants to function in a place where everything is on the edge and that there's constant chaos. I'm not one of those. And I do a little bit of training as well of curates, people who are training to be priests, and talk to them about boundaries and things like that. And I always foreground the, you know, reject the hero priest, because you don't do it in your strength, you do it in the strength given to you by God. And I think all three of us would agree with that. You know, it's God's strength that animates us to be able to serve in the way that we do. But also, I think, you know, going forward, I think what we're going to have to do is to be really attentive and really flexible, because I think there'll be people in our congregations who will be just champing at the bit now, and I have them to say, right, okay, when are we going to be able to have tea and coffee after our service? When are we going to be able to gather together? When are we going? I mean, for us, for my people, is when can we sing? You know. So there's all of that, and then I've got some people who are simply not ready to come to church. And it's not just church, it's anything where there's large groups of people. They're just not ready for it. So I suppose with each person, we have to be just really attentive to where they are and try to step into the space that they are in, and minister to them where they are, and make everything possible for them without pushing, I think is the way I'd put it. So trying to do kind of activities that blend some of those possibilities. So the possibility to do something where you are with a bigger group of people, or where actually you're not, and there's no face lost by doing that. I think also the other thing I'd want to kind of stick into the mix is digital poverty, which I did a presentation on for the diocese with Bishop Rob, the area bishop of Edmonton, our area. And we had significant problems with digital poverty. So we simply could not just go online, because people didn't have the right type of hardware to use. They didn't have the packages that would give them all of the data they would need. It just didn't work, and we couldn't make it work. So we went back to the old-fashioned, my telephone bill went through the roof, basically. And it was one of the things also that older people could do for each other. So they could sit and have a telephone call when they couldn't go out and do the shopping for someone or something like that. So I think also we need to remember as we go forward, the Church of England talks about hybrid or blended, they've got all these phrases for it. But that does only work for some people in some areas. And in our area, that was certainly something that we identified as being a problem, and that we would need to be attentive to that going forward as well. What do we do with people who don't have the capacity through digital means, but are not yet ready to be in person?
So yeah, so it's being aware of individuals having different circumstances that arrange. There's a lot of nodding from BB. I know it's the same situation and issues for your community. BB, perhaps we maybe we could discuss a bit on stigma now of mental health, and how we how that is broached. How do you approach it?
I think it's a really difficult time now. I think there's so much training and accessibility to services that's available in our community. So the first thing that I feel that's really important to establish is, where do we refer? Who do we refer? And what types of things do we refer? Because everything doesn't fit into a category that someone's referred for mental health issues and they end up on tablets and that's it. It's not like that. there is so much more that we're dealing with now as a result of mental ill health, or things that people are really concerned about. And so I know that working with the council, I'm sure David will agree, have been really good in forthcoming with suggestions of where we go, what we do. I mean, right down to cases where it's to do with welfare benefits or referrals for counselling because they've experienced death, bereavement counselling, etc. I was really, I saw the statistics on the young people who are accessing A&E because of mental ill health and, you know, self-harming, feeling because of isolation, being away from their friends, not sharing any of those things. So we're not even dealing with one category of mental ill health. It's the whole family that's struggling at this moment. Now, in my community, I know that right now is probably a little bit easier to talk to people than it was a little while ago when we were doing it just on phones or social media. Because as Mother Carol just said, is so many times it's about seeing you, it's about you smiling, it's about you communicating that you're listening or understanding even. You don't even have to sometimes do anything.
That's right.
But it's that support that people need and that people want. And so this is where we as community leaders, we can only evaluate those individual cases. And where we know that we can make some impact, that's great. But if we can't, and it needs referral, is for us all to know the mechanisms for referring and what do we refer. And it may be that in Rabbi Mason's place, a synagogue, he's got a particular course running, or in Mother Carol's one, where we can all share, because this is not the time for us to be all working independently. We need to work together because it's the whole community that's struggling and suffering. And so that's where I'm focusing, if you like, on reaching out to people, just saying to them, are you okay? How are you? Let them tell me what they've been through if they want to share it. And that actually, I have seen it during Ramadan, especially, where they have said to us, you know, that's made me feel so much better just to be able to share it with you, you know. And it doesn't even have to be me, it could be anyone in our community that they see as an authority, if you like, or that's someone that's important. They make the judgments. We don't make this judgment about us, but both of you, David and Mother Carol, people will make judgments and they feel that sense of release when they're talking to one of you or our imams or any of those people. So I do think, Andre, that it is going to be a direct collating. We've got to do a bit more of working together, and we've got to do a bit more working to get the agencies and the authorities to be able to work with us as well too, so that we've got a very clear path.
It's interesting what you say, that sometimes it's just a smile, and you know, sometimes it's a small bit of compassion and understanding can change things. We had Alistair Campbell on earlier, and he tells a story of in the 1980s, he was having a really difficult time, and it was just a policeman saying, "Are you all right, mate?" And something as simple as that can open things up. David, you mentioned before that obviously at times you found things difficult. How are you doing now?
I think one of the things that is, yeah, I'm all right. I mean, I think that, thank you for asking. I think that one of the things that does make me think and reflect on is that when we talk about mental health, we often obviously think it in terms of diagnosis. Am I depressed? Do I have a diagnosis? Am I, you know, clinically depressed? Do I have, you know, and that and I think maybe there's obviously that's important. People who are, you know, depressed, you know, if there is a need for a diagnosis and support that way. But I think there's also a whole area between wellness and diagnosis, which also can be part of the mental health conversation. So yeah, I feel, you know, I myself have, you know, for a number of different reasons, I go to therapy. I have therapy. It's really important. Every faith leader probably needs it because we're exposed to a lot of people. And I was once at a colleague's synagogue and I was about to go off to session. I said to him, you know, I've got to go now, I'm going to my therapy. He said, "Oh, what's wrong? Oh my gosh, that's awful." You know, and I'm like, I'm all right actually, but it really is something that is helpful for me to turn and return to myself and help and grow as a person.
Yes.
So I think that's something that maybe is worth, now look, therapy costs, right? And there's an issue there as to, a society needs to think about how it deals. It's not something you're going to go to a GP and get referred to unless you really are not well. But for instance, I don't know, taking antidepressants, there's probably a lot of mystic around. It's very mystical for many. It's a real stigma. But for many people, that might be quite important just to help them through a period. So I think it's part of that conversation where it's okay, we're all going to feel it. We're all going to be in that mix, in that gray area between wellness, and more serious diagnosis. And maybe we're all there. Maybe everyone's there. We're all there. We all have difficult. At the moment, I can say that I feel it's more complicated now emotionally coming out. And I also think of how I've been affected by having to, probably the word is police a community where they have to sit 2 meters. I mean, I have a religion which is based on law, right? There's laws, so you have to make sure the food's kosher in the synagogue. But on that, you've got to add that everyone has to have a mask and cover their nose and sit 2 meters, and someone sits in there and you've got to tell them to move 2 seats, and they find it hard. That's really takes some getting used to. And you can never get used to that.
So there's general practical issues. We've got a few minutes left. I should say that if anybody wants to ask a question of the panel, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Drop it in and we'll see if we can put a couple of questions.
Just very, very quickly, Dan, because I know something I want to say, that the difference I think is really important to understand is that, religions are very, very connected to God-given law and God-given revelation. And all the regulations that we have are not God-given. Now, they probably are connected to God because they're to keep us safe and keep us alive. And that's part of our religious belief. But that's not meaning that we should ever be against them, God forbid. I'm just explaining it in the sense that it's hard. Because we want to relate to our own religions and how we live it out in our lived existence.
Can I just add on that to what David has said? You're absolutely right, David. Because those are things that we faced. The mosque is there. Why can't I come in to pray? God says it's the house of Allah. Why am I not coming in? And then we've got these administrative cleansing things that we've got to do, opening restrictions, etc. And to a certain extent, for me, I've even got blamed because I'm a woman. I'm a woman. I'm implementing these rules in this mosque that's predominantly male orientated. So there's been so many things. Remember that everyone had issues before this pandemic hit. The pandemic has served to increase some of those things. Families have been together for such a long time, haven't had the ability to talk to anyone else outside or see anyone. And then now when you're coming to it, like me, my brother said he saw this advert for the big marches in the parks or something, walks in the parks. And I sort of said to them, no. Can you all stay where you are until we know what's going on with this Indian variant? And they're all saying to me, listen, you go to the mosque and you see 400 people. Well, there's not going to be 400 people on this, but it's this natural fear. Everyone's at a different level and it's about balancing.
And we're all making so many judgments and judgment calls that there aren't right answers in these things. Because they're laid down in response to a pandemic we don't know about. Does that, Mother Carol, has seen similar experience?
This is really fascinating because we're now touching on something that is sometimes unspoken. I talk about a sense of kind of appropriate vulnerability, and again, this is in my work with people training to be priests. That we do have to be appropriately vulnerable. We're not super people. Male, Superman, Superwoman. We have to be able to tell people that we too experience some fear and some concern and some worry, and also that I suppose this idea. When I worked with younger people in St. John's College in Cambridge, they were always looking to be happy, and I kept saying to them that that's not how life should be. Life isn't going along in this one line where you're happy all the time. Life has ups and downs, and that's what creates character and resilience, as your speaker previous to this was talking about, and also about just being a human being in touch with themselves and the world. So there are going to be times when all of us experience periods of being down or being a bit fed up, and then there is something else called, having a clinical depression or something. But I think we need to allow for that space for people to say, I'm fed up. I've lost a year of my life. I'm fed up, and say, yeah, okay, it's okay to be fed up. And I feel a bit fed up sometimes too. But now, how can we move out of that? What is it about our faiths that gives us the strength to move forward? What is there about the rhythm of our faith year that tells us that there is a movement towards, a good time and a time of joy and celebration? That's so important as well, isn't it? And that's something that our faiths can give to people, to say the world goes around and we move around a year, and in that there's going to be times of down and times of up, and hopefully, as we're in a kind of a post-Easter season, so we're very much in the up time at the moment, but that resonates, doesn't it? Something about the natural way that a year and our lives just circle. Yeah,
absolutely. It's important to remember that these issues aren't new. This is life, isn't it? This is how we live. I'm conscious of the time, so Bibi, any final reflections from you on where we are now and mental health and your people?
Just very quickly, I am concerned, but I do believe that we have the ability of, as Mother Carol just said a moment ago, it's about sharing with our communities. It's about helping our communities and deciding with them, where is it that we go? What is it that you want of me? How can I help you? And I think by doing this and sharing, we will be able to help each other and even identify the cases that need support and help from the teams who are available to do that. I think we have still got a little way to go, if I'm honest, Andre, because many people are not ready for this and some people are over ready for this to the point of confrontation. We've got to balance that. We've got to learn it. And as we go along, I think if you repeated this session in 3 months' time, I think you'll then have a better answer of what it is exactly that we're coping, because we will know better what we're going to be seeing, how we will deal with it, what we will do. Thank you so much for today.
Well, thank you for joining us, and yeah, let's certainly have this session in 3 months' time and see where we are. David, any final words from you?
I think, again, also thank you from my perspective as well. I think people now will have the possibility to come back into the synagogue in greater numbers, and I think we'll find meaning from the presence. I think we'll realize that there's no substitute. We had food outside. We had the Shavuot festival, which is probably parallel to Pentecost. I think you would say it's the 50-day festival.
Yes.
after the Passover. And we used, it was on the 17th of May. So it was the first time when we could actually have food outside, tables of 6 people, each distance 2 meters. And it was just a lovely atmosphere to see 60, 65 people, and they were all good, everyone behaved, and it was just, it was a feeling of love and togetherness. So I think community brings meaning. Meaning can help. Community allows people to be face to face, see each other, to spot when there are issues, and allows conversations to be had. And I think this is, as I think Bibi quite rightly put, this is an ongoing thing now. The COVID reality doesn't stop. We're never going to beat COVID anyway, because COVID will be a virus that will be with us. The day that the pandemic is over, and there will be a day when that is not the end of the real crisis that the pandemic has thrown to us, which will rumble on, and it will be up to, I think, faith leaders will have a really important part in that.
Thank you. And well, Mother Carol, anything to add to meaning, love, togetherness and community?
Tall order. Just to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to come together as faith leaders, because there is so much we have in common and so much to share. And it's just been a joy to be with a brother and a sister in faith today. Thank you.
Well, on that note, thank you, all 3 of you. I wish you well